Coruscant sounded like it was dying. Sirens braided through the midnight canyons, harmonizing with the distant crackle of flame as the Jedi Temple burned beyond the skyline. Searchlights combed rooftops and landing pads, white fingers desperate to touch a fugitive who had once been the Republic's brightest blade. In a shadowed hangar tucked behind a Senate maintenance corridor, Anakin Skywalker paced like a caged storm. His cloak was gone. His boots were dusted with ash. One gauntlet trembled, not from injury, but from the aftershock of what he'd done, and what he still believed he had to do. The new name Sidious had pressed into him did not sit like armor. It sat like a brand. A door hissed. Padmé Amidala stepped through it without an escort, without her usual procession of aides and guards. No jeweled headdress, no diplomatic mask, just a woman with her heart in her throat and a single data chip clenched in her hand like a prayer. Anakin snapped toward her, eyes bright with fevered light. For a heartbeat, the old man flickered. Relief, longing, the instinct to run to her. Then the other thing rose, the thing that had been fed by fear for too long. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice rough. "They'll trace you." "I already traced myself," Padme answered, and the steadiness in her tone was the only stable ground in the room. "I used my own clearance to walk through their net. If anyone asks, I was in a meeting. If anyone follows, it'll lead them to an empty office and a locked door." He stared at her like he couldn't decide whether she was real. Padme took another step. The air between them felt charged, as if the Force itself was holding its breath. "What happened?" she asked softly, as if the volume could keep the galaxy from hearing. Anakin's jaw worked. His gaze cut away, then snapped back, sharp enough to slice. "They forced it," he said. "They forced my hand. The Jedi. They—" The words broke, reformed, became a new shape. "I had to do what I did. There was no other way." Padme's eyes glistened. She didn't flinch from him. She didn't move back. She reached up, slow, palms open, offering a touch like permission rather than possession. "Then let me make a choice," she whispered. "Let me choose you. Not this. You." He swallowed hard, anger and terror colliding in his chest. "You don't understand. They're coming. Palpatine—" "I understand enough," Padme said, and held up the data chip. "This has fresh ident codes, a diplomatic transponder he hasn't blacklisted yet, and I have access to a flight plan corridor that won't flag us until we're out of the core." His eyes narrowed. "Us." Padme nodded once, like the word had weight and she meant to carry it. Outside, distant explosions rolled over the city like thunder. Anakin's breath hitched, then came out too fast. "If we run, we'll be hunted. If we stay," Padme said, voice breaking on the edge of truth, "you'll be chained. And I'll lose you anyway." He looked at her, really looked, and something raw moved behind his gaze. Fear? Yes, but also a desperate kind of hope, bright and lethal. "Where?" he asked. Padme didn't hesitate. "Tatooine." The name landed like a stone. Anakin's face tightened, a reflexive recoil from old memories. Heat, hunger, chains. His mother's hands cracked from work, the taste of sand in every breath. "No," he said. "Anywhere, but—" "It's the last place they'll look for me," Padme said. "And it's the last place they'll believe you'd crawl back to." Anakin's mouth opened, then closed. His hands curled. Padme stepped close enough that he could feel her warmth. "Please," she said, "come with me." For a moment, the galaxy narrowed to that word. Please. Anakin's shoulders sagged as if a war had finally found a pause. "All right," he murmured, and the relief in Padme's eyes nearly shattered him. "We go. We go now." They moved like thieves who knew they were stealing their own lives. Padme slid the chip into the hangar console, fingers flying through Senate access menus she'd once used to schedule hearings and draft policy. Now she forged their disappearance. A phantom flight plan, a ghost manifest, a diplomatic clearance that would last only until the Empire realized the Senate was no longer a shield. Anakin stalked the perimeter, listening to the building with the Force, hearing footsteps in distant corridors, feeling the cold logic of patrol patterns like teeth closing. When the hangar doors began to open, a security officer appeared at the threshold, confused by the override. "What is—" the man started. Anakin's hand lifted. The officer's words died in his throat. His eyes went wide, feet scraping the floor as invisible pressure tightened. He reached for his comlink with shaking fingers. Padme's voice cut in like a blade of ice. "Anakin." The pressure eased just enough. The officer collapsed, coughing, clutching his neck alive. Anakin didn't look at him. He looked at Padme, expression twisted with the effort of restraint. "I'm not letting them take you," he said. Padme stepped into him and pressed her forehead briefly against his. "Then don't become the thing you think will protect me." His eyes fluttered shut for a heartbeat, and when they opened again, the fever was still there, but leashed. They lifted off into Coruscant's bruised sky, slipping through traffic lanes that were suddenly full of military silhouettes. Padme's codes opened a corridor for them like a cracked door held by sheer audacity. Anakin flew like he was angry at the stars. By the time the Outer Rim swallowed them, the Empire had already begun to write its first story. The story said a Jedi butcher had survived the temple. The story said a senator had gone missing. The story didn't say their names. Not yet. Names were power, and the Empire preferred fear without shape. They needed credits before they needed rest. Padme contacted an old aide through a chain of disposable relays, voice disguised, details hidden. She got them a rendezvous point with supplies, but the message came with a warning. The Empire was squeezing every port, every lane. No one wanted to be the person who helped the wrong fugitives. Anakin listened, jaw tight, then turned the ship toward a small Imperial supply station, drifting near a cargo route like a spider on a thread. "We take what we need," he said. Padme's stomach sank. "Anakin!" "No charity," he snapped. "No favors. We don't owe anyone. We don't give them leverage. It'll be violence." His eyes flashed. "It's survival." She held his gaze, searching for the man who used to argue in the council chamber about doing the right thing. He was still there, somewhere, but wrapped in barbed wire. "All right," Padme said, voice low. "Fast. Clean. No unnecessary blood." Anakin gave a stiff nod that wasn't agreement so much as permission. The station's lights were harsh and sterile. Stormtroopers hadn't become ubiquitous yet. This was still the early transition, the last gasp of clone discipline and new Imperial arrogance. The guards didn't expect a senator's ship to come screaming in with its transponder scrambled. They moved through corridors in stolen uniforms. Padme spoke when she had to, smile sharp as a vibra knife, flashing forged manifests like they were sacred documents. People believed paper more than they believed instinct. Anakin moved like a shadow that didn't belong. When a clerk reached for an alarm, a security door crumpled inward as if punched by a giant fist. When a patrol rounded a corner too soon, the soldier slammed into the wall, stunned, gasping, alive. Padme's relief was brittle. He was obeying her rule. But she could feel the strain in him, the way each mercy cost him something, and each act of power fed the wrong hunger. They escaped with a crate of credits, new ident tags, and a small arsenal of supplies. A holocam caught a blur, a cloaked figure, a flash of blue-white light, an impossible movement that looked like myth. By the time their ship angled toward the sand-colored dot of Tatooine, the Empire had added another line to its story. The Jedi Butcher was alive. Tatooine greeted them with heat that felt personal. The sky was a clean, merciless blue. The twin suns pressed down like judgment. Wind dragged sand across the landing pad in thin, restless sheets. Mos Espa was all cracked stone and scavenged metal, a town built from the bones of other people's dreams. Padme wore a hood and a name that wasn't hers. Anakin wore silence like armor, jaw tight as he stared at the horizon, where the dunes rolled like waves frozen mid-crash. They bought a half-collapsed house on the edge of town, with credits that still smelled like Imperial steel. It had a sagging roof, a door that didn't close right, and walls that held the day's heat long after the suns dipped. Perfect, Padme told herself. Perfect for people who needed to disappear. She set rules as if rules could stitch a torn universe back together. No killing, unless there was no other option. No lightsaber in public. No forced displays that couldn't be explained as luck or local superstition. Anakin listened, arms crossed, eyes distant. But he nodded. For a while, he tried. They slept in the same bed again, not as secret lovers stealing hours from duty, but as fugitives sharing a thin pocket of peace. They cooked food that tasted like dust, and laughed at how terrible they were at pretending to be ordinary. Padme found herself leaning into his warmth at night, and hating herself for how much it felt like home. And then the Empire's shadow arrived anyway, not in banners, but in smaller things. New patrols on the outskirts, a fresh garrison in Mos Eisley, local syndicates suddenly flush with credits and interest in quiet work. When an Imperial payroll caravan rolled through the desert, Padme watched the poor in Mos Espa line up for scraps, and felt something old and furious twist in her chest. "We can take it," she said one night, eyes on a rough map she'd sketched. "Not for us. For them." Anakin's smile was sharp. Finally. They hit the caravan at dawn when the light turned the sand pink and the air was still cool enough to breathe. Padme planned the approach. False distress beacon. A staged breakdown on a narrow pass between dunes. Anakin executed it like a nightmare given hands. The stormtroopers came out cautious, blasters raised. Padme's voice carried calm authority through the confusion, her hood shadowing her face as she pointed them toward the problem. Then Anakin moved. He didn't ignite his saber. He didn't need to. The lead trooper's blaster flew from his grip, as if yanked by an invisible chain. Another trooper stumbled, disoriented, as sand rose around his boots and locked him in place like quickstone. Fear did the rest. Fear. always did the rest. Padme grabbed the credits, the rations, the water filters, hands quick, mind already on distribution routes back in Mos Espa. They vanished into the desert before the caravan could make sense of what had happened. By nightfall, whispered stories threaded through cantinas. A masked couple. A desert angel leaving crates at doors. A sand demon who could crush metal with his mind. Padme hated those names. She feared them. She also understood why people clung to legends when reality offered only hunger. Anakin began to glow with the attention, like a man starving for acknowledgement. The hits continued. Payroll caravans, supply skiffs, a discreet raid on a small garrison storage shed that left troopers bound and shaken rather than dead, because Padme stood in front of Anakin when she saw his jaw tighten and his eyes go flat. Each time they fled back to their crumbling house, breathless with adrenaline, laughing like they were young again. They kissed with sand still on their lips and told each other they were free. And each time, the rot underneath grew. Anakin started talking about control the way other people talked about weather. If I can see every lane, every patrol, every informant, he muttered as he paced their small room. They can't surprise us. They can't take you. Padme would catch his hands and make him sit, make him breathe. We're not building an empire in the sand, she'd say. We're surviving. But he didn't want survival. Not really. He wanted certainty. The bounty hunters arrived quietly. Not the famous ones in holodramas, not at first. Local trackers, desert scum with scopes and greed. Then syndicate crews. Then a sleek off-worlder who watched Mos Espa from a high balcony for days. Never drinking, never sleeping, just listening. Padme felt the net tightening with the instinct that had made her survive Senate politics. The Empire wasn't admitting anything publicly. It didn't have to. It could shape rumor like clay, push every outlaw and copycat into a single story, then use that story to herd its prey. A rival crew started mimicking their raids, leaving bodies behind to make the legend bloodier. The Empire pinned the crimes on Tatooine bandits in a quiet bulletin that reached every cantina. People began to stare a second too long at Padme's hood, at Anakin's stride. Then Padme heard about a shipment. Not just credits. Medical crates, rare and expensive, headed for the garrison. And something else. Sealed tech cases with markings she didn't recognize, but which made an old fear crawl up her spine when she asked the right questions. Force detection tech. A program. A net designed to catch children who felt the world too sharply. Padme's voice turned cold when she told Anakin, "We take it." Anakin's eyes darkened. "We burn it." "We need the medical supplies," she argued. "People will die without them." "We burn the scanners," he snapped back. "We scatter the ashes. Make sure they never use them." They compromised, as lovers do, as outlaws do, as people pretending they still had choices. They hit Mos Eisley at dusk, when the spaceport's chaos made it easier to hide. Padme posed as a shipping auditor, voice crisp, paperwork flawless. Anakin stayed in the shadows, a presence that made dockworkers suddenly decide they didn't want to look too closely. They got the crates onto a borrowed speeder and fled into the labyrinthine alleys behind the port. And then the moment came that cracked Anakin open. A child stood at the corner of a narrow street, dirty-faced, eyes too big, watching them with the kind of stillness that belonged to prey. The child's gaze locked onto Anakin, and something in the air shifted. An invisible recognition, a trembling thread of the Force. Anakin saw himself. He saw a slave boy on a sun-bleached street. He saw small hands reaching for his mother's. He saw what an empire would do to a child who was useful. His breath caught. His focus shattered. A trooper shouted, spotting them. Blaster raised. Anakin's hand lifted on reflex. The trooper flew backward, slammed hard into a wall. The sound was sickening. The street went silent. People stared. The child stared harder. Padme grabbed Anakin's arm like it was a lifeline. "Anakin!" His eyes were wild. His chest heaved. For a heartbeat, he looked like a man waking from a nightmare and realizing he was the monster in it. Padme stepped in front of him, hands on his face, forcing his gaze to hers. "We are not doing this," she hissed. "Not here. Not in front of them." His jaw trembled. "They'll take that child." "Then we move," Padme said, and her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "We keep the shipment. We get out. We find a way to help without becoming." The rest of the sentence died because she couldn't say it without breaking, without becoming him. They escaped. Barely. Behind them, Mos Eisley erupted in sirens and shouted orders. Ahead of them, the dunes waited like an ocean that could swallow anything. Back in their house, Padme redistributed the medical crates in the dead of night, leaving them at doors, bribing the right people, saving lives one quiet act at a time. Anakin sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at his hands like he couldn't remember what they were for, besides breaking things. Padme watched him and felt exhaustion settle into her bones. Their love had become a cycle. Danger, adrenaline, intimacy, regret. Over and over like a wheel stuck in sand. "You're afraid," Anakin said suddenly, voice low. Padme's throat tightened. "I'm tired. Tired of me." "No," she whispered, and hated how the lie tasted. "I'm tired of fighting you." He flinched, anger flashing up like fire. "I'm fighting for us." "You're fighting for control," Padme said, and the truth fell between them like a dead thing. "That's not the same." Anakin stood, pacing again, a storm looking for an outlet. "You think I don't know that? You think I wanted this? They took everything, and left me with nothing but—" "With power," Padme interrupted softly. "And you don't know how to put it down." He stopped. His eyes were wet, furious at the weakness. "If I put it down, I lose you." Padme's heart cracked. "You're already losing me," she said, voice breaking. "Not because I don't love you, because I don't recognize what love turns into when it's fed by fear." The trap came in the shape of hope. A whisper ran through Mos Espa, a corridor off-world, a smuggler who'd found a hole in the Empire's tightening fist. All they had to do was steal a data core from the newly arrived garrison. Something small, something easy. Enough credits for passage, enough leverage to keep their heads. Padme smelled the setup immediately. "It's too clean." Anakin's eyes glittered. "Or it's our way out." "We don't have to take the bait," she pleaded. He stepped close, voice intense. "We can outplay them. I can outplay them. Just this once. Then we're gone." Padme looked at him and realized the dream of escape was the last drug they shared. Without it, there was only the truth. They were bleeding out in slow motion. So they went. The garrison was carved into stone at the edge of town, new metal bolted onto old rock like a parasite. They slipped inside through a maintenance tunnel Padme had bribed a worker to map. Doors opened too easily. Guards fell too quickly. It felt wrong. And then the courtyard lights snapped on. Floodlights turned night into day. A wall of troopers rose from hidden positions, heavy weapons already aimed. A shuttle hovered overhead, engines whining like a predator. At the far edge of the formation stood something else. Not a trooper. Not a local bounty hunter. A tall figure in dark armor, face hidden behind a mask that reflected nothing. A humming blade of pale energy ignited in their hand, wrong in color, wrong in sound, like a scream turned into light. An Inquisitor prototype, Padme thought with cold dread. The Empire's answer to the rumor it refused to name. Anakin swore under his breath, pulling Padme behind a low barrier as blaster fire erupted. Stone exploded into grit. Sand sprayed like water. Padme's ears rang. Her heart hammered. She pressed a hand to Anakin's chest like she could anchor him. "This is it," she shouted over the noise. "This is the end of the road, unless we change it." Anakin's eyes were locked on the masked figure. Rage simmered, eager, familiar. "I can take them." Padme shook her head, tears burning. "You can kill them. That's not the same as winning." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the possessive terror in him like a chain. "There's a way out," Padme said, voice suddenly steady with a terrible clarity. "I surrender. I tell them I'll cooperate. I buy you time to run." Anakin's face went white with fury. "No!" "Listen to me," Padme pleaded, gripping his face the way she had in Mos Eisley. "If you love me, you have to let me choose." His breath hitched, his hands shook. "I can't lose you." Padme's eyes filled. "You already did," she whispered, and it wasn't cruelty, it was grief. "You lost me the moment love became a cage." Blaster fire chewed the barrier. The masked Inquisitor moved closer, unhurried, certain. Padme reached into her cloak, pulled out the ident chip, and pressed it into Anakin's palm. "Go," she said. "Disappear into the dunes sea. Be nobody. Let the sand erase you if it has to." Anakin stared at the chip like it was an accusation. Padme leaned in and kissed him, brief and fierce, tasting salt and dust and the last good part of him. "Please," she whispered against his lips. "Don't make my sacrifice meaningless by turning it into a massacre." For a heartbeat, he looked like a man standing on a ledge, staring down into himself. Then he jerked his head once, a violent motion, like he was tearing something free. "No," he whispered, and it broke her. "No more." He grabbed her hand, pulling her up. They ran. Two figures sprinting through open ground, sand kicking up behind their boots. The waiting speeder near the wall suddenly seemed ridiculous, a prop in a story the Empire had already written. Blaster fire tore through the air. Anakin threw out his hand, and for a heartbeat the bolts hung, suspended like angry stars. Sand swirled upward in a spiraling column, a storm born from pure will. Troopers shouted, confused, as the Force bent the night around them. But there were too many angles, too many weapons, too much inevitability. A bolt struck Padme. She faltered, breath knocked out of her, and the world lurched. Anakin screamed, not a word, but a sound that felt ancient, ugly, raw. The Force detonated outward. Troopers flew like dolls. Metal groaned and snapped. Stone cracked. For a moment he could have slaughtered them all. Padme hit the sand on her side, blood darkening the pale grit. Her hand fumbled, reaching. Anakin dropped to his knees beside her, hands shaking, frantic. "No," he choked. "No, no, no." Padme's eyes found his, and despite the pain, they were clear. "You have a choice," she whispered. He shook his head, sobbing now, the boy from Tatooine surfacing under the wreckage of the fallen knight. "I can fix it. I can—" "You can't," Padme said gently, and the gentleness shattered him more than any blaster could. "Not this." The Inquisitor's humming blade drew closer through the sandstorm, steady as death. Padme's fingers curled around Anakin's wrist, weak but insistent. "Run," she breathed. Promise me you'll stop." Anakin's face contorted. Everything in him screamed to drag the world down, to crush every threat until nothing existed but him and Padme. Padme's thumb brushed his skin, a tiny, human touch. "Let me choose," she whispered again. Anakin trembled. Then, like a man swallowing poison, he nodded once. "I promise," he rasped, and it felt like ripping out his own heart. Padme exhaled, relief flickering across her face. "Good," she murmured. That's the man I loved." He pressed his forehead to hers for a breath, then forced himself upright, staggering as if gravity had changed. The sandstorm he'd summoned collapsed. The suspended blaster bolts crashed into the ground like meteors. Troopers regained their footing, disoriented, furious. Anakin turned and ran into the dunes sea, cloak snapping behind him like a torn banner, becoming a ghost in his own birthplace. Behind him, Padme lay in the sand, eyes on the stars, listening to the Empire's boots approach, and refusing to let fear have the last word. In the morning, an Imperial shuttle lifted off from the outskirts of Mos Espa, carrying its official story away. Criminals contained, order restored, rumors extinguished. Wind moved over the dunes, smoothing the ground where the fight had happened. 2 sets of footprints stretched into the sand, then broke, scattered, vanished. And in Mos Espa, people still whispered about the outlaw lovers who thought the desert could hide a fallen hero. Some swore the desert angel survived. Some swore the sand demon still walked the dunes at night, not hunting, not saving, just wandering, haunted by a promise he had finally learned to keep.